Hello everyone, my name is Paul, and welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic day. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend thus far, and I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There's been a ton of stuff that's been happening over the last 24 hours throughout the world. Obviously, it's not as much quite as our recaps on the 48, but that's fine. It's always, usually when we're talking about the news, no news is good news, as what usually comes out is stuff that's relatively depressing, and generally speaking, it's not always very good. We actually go out of our way to find something interesting and good every night if we can. But there is a ton of stuff happening nonetheless, and as I said, a lot of it is pretty terrible, but that means that there's an opportunity there for you and for me, and that is not to just get you informed on what's happening throughout the world, but to give back and to help people that are affected by this by these terrible crises that are happening. Whether you're talking about wars, conflicts, you're talking about terrorism, you're talking about political instability, you're talking about climate issues, natural disasters, a wide spectrum of different things. So I implore you to join us in being able to be the news that gives back. And the way you're able to do that is if you check out the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different organizations down there, all of which 80% or more of the donations that they receive go directly to the programs. It's something that we vet for through them, and we go and you can give to them knowing that your money will actually go where it's stated it will need to go. And so we'll be able to, they cover a very wide variety of things. If you want to help the war effort in Ukraine, or whether you want to help humanitarian assistance, you can do that. If you want to help with the ongoing issues in Africa, whether you're talking about the drought in Somalia or humanitarian aid in Ethiopia, there's stuff there for that too, as well as recovery efforts in Southeast Asia. And if you have more, please feel free to send them over to us. We're always looking for more. We want to get more added to this. We want to cover every inch of the globe that we can and be able to help as many people as possible. If you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. One of the biggest things you can do is help us, and by help us supporting the channel, the way you're able to do that, giving us that like, that subscribe, letting your friends and family know about us, and sharing this amongst the community. You can also follow us and share our stuff on Twitter, and also our articles, which we write on Substack and many other locations too. You can also go, if you are interested in checking out the maps or going through any of our archive maps, we do have them available on the website for you to follow along. They're published every single night that we're live, so that way you can go through and check everything out. And all of our Discord and our website is in the description below as well. Now, before we get really into the news here, if you are watching live with us, please feel free to ask questions or make comments. I am watching the live chat, and I will answer any questions to the best of my ability. To give you a little bit of a background on myself, if you've never been here before, I served in the Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I served as an 0352 and a corporal with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, where I was deployed to the Middle East twice. My first deployments in the Middle East between October of 2017 and March of 2018. I spent 4.5 months in the country of Syria, supporting Special Operations Forces, as well as our Kurdish partners in the fight against the Islamic State under Operation Inherent Resolve. And then during transit, I was in Kuwait for about a month and a half in total. During my second deployment between October of 2019 and March of 2020, I was once again deployed back to the Middle East, where I served as the Javelin team leader for the Crisis Response Company out of Kuwait, where I spent the vast majority of my time. On New Year's of 2020, I responded as one of the 100 Marines that went to the Baghdad Embassy complex in response to 4,000 protesters attempting to overrun the U.S. Embassy. I oversaw all anti-armor operations over the Baghdad Embassy complex and assisted in the security there as well. And after that, I was rotated to Saudi Arabia to train Saudi Arabian Marines in their efforts in Yemen. So they're getting ready to deploy to Yemen to fight the Houthi rebels as part of Saudi coalition there. I'm a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare, armor doctrine. I am also a fully cross-trained machine gunner, fully cross-trained rifleman, a partially cross-trained radio operator, and a CLS, or Combat Lifesaver Certified Marine, meaning I've received additional medical training on top of what Marines normally receive, so that way I can help Navy corpsmen in the event that there are casualties that need assisted with. Outside of that, I try to remain well-rounded, and I have a lot of interest in other things. I have a love for history and have from a very young age. I'm also very interested in human geography, geopolitics, paleontology, archaeology, and a wide spectrum of other things throughout the world. So while I will never claim to be an expert in them, I will at least do my best to answer some of these questions with the knowledge that I do have. So please feel free to continue to ask them. Subject matter expert or not, doesn't matter. I still employ my viewers regardless to always please do your own research. If you want a starting point, once again, we do provide the map on our website. You're more than welcome to check out any of the associated articles we have linked with them or any of our sources that we have linked to them as well. And you can go through and you can check out everything for some knowledge and verifying our information. Or you can always go out and do it on your own regardless. So I always implore that you do your own research if any of these topics do have an interest to you. Simply don't listen to anything that you're told on the internet all the time. Please do your own research. It's very important for you to stay informed in that regard. And with that, we begin into the news here, starting off with our special report coming out of the country of Ukraine, of course, as we have every single day since we've started the channel. And we actually start up here in Bucha. And while Bucha, normally we're talking about some relatively dire circumstances given what had happened back in March and April, something a little bit more uplifting has happened here in Bucha. Yes, it's a Christmas tree. So as you may be well know, the holidays are upon us, and we're getting ready to celebrate Christmas and New Year's in the United States and Hanukkah if you're Jewish. But there's a ton of stuff happening all over the world, and we're looking at Bucha here, which, despite everything that has happened, like we said yesterday, you just can't cancel Christmas. And Putin definitely isn't going to be able to do that in Ukraine this year. We've seen Christmas trees going up in Mykolaiv, and we've also seen them going up elsewhere throughout the country. Bucha is no exception. Most residents are in favor of there being a tree, as it's always been stated, the Ukrainians are extremely perseverant and aren't going to let what has happened to them bring them down. They were polled as well if they would like to install one or not, and that is the Christmas tree there for you. So there is one going to be going up. We do have an update from Army Commander Konscriptovich, finally, who appeared to have been absent last night following his temporary relievement due to having panic attacks, even though there was no panic. And from Nuclear, quote, "I am proud to say that we have finally taken Bakhmut for real this time." Coming from Army Commander Konscriptovich, I do not believe that that is true. We will get to that, however, as we continue on with the news. We jump over here into Kyiv, where the Christmas tree for Ukraine was lit up. And of course, it was in the same place, in the same park as it is every single year. Except, of course, this year is a little bit different. The tree was decorated with light-efficient light bulbs and toys from the last year. And the Ukrainian Trident is on top. It's all being run off of a generator so as not to drain from the city's supply. So here it is going up and being lit. And of course it is in the country's colors of blue and yellow with a trident as its topper. So very nice to see. Obviously they're not going to use a whole bunch of light bulbs because obviously trying to be energy efficient given the situation in Ukraine. But once again, you can't cancel Christmas, and Ukraine is pressing very well ahead as even though they continue to be heavily embattled in this war, they will continue to celebrate in any way that they can and at least bring some kind of measure of normality and be extremely perseverant as we have seen them do so in the past. The commander-in-chief of Ukraine received the Fire of Bethlehem. Representatives of the Plast Scout organization handed out the Bethlehem Flame of Peace to the commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. In turn, General Valery Zaluzhny signed a flag t-shirt for the charity auction and handed gifts to the scouts. Commander-in-chief said, quote, "The Fire of Bethlehem at this time for the armed forces is the future light, which will be called simply victory." Coming from the General Staff of Ukraine. You can see that he is there signing a Ukrainian flag, and you can see him there holding the light of Bethlehem. So pretty awesome to see. Zaluzhny has been a very important figure in the war. He oversees the entirety of the armed forces of Ukraine. And he has continued, and he has been really the mastermind behind a lot of the victories. While, of course, smaller commanders, it is a team effort, and everyone makes that stuff come together. Overall, he is the one that is directing the war effort, and he's a very, if you've ever actually read any of his stuff or actually seen some of the stuff he says, especially prior to the war, he's a very warm and loving and very funny, kind person. But he is, when it comes to warfare, he is a master in his craft, and he is very well aware of what it is taking in order to win the war. And he has done extensively. He's done a wonderful job, I think, given this country's very decrepit situation at the beginning of the war, turning it around completely and to bring it to where it is now. Regarding electricity, which we know over 50% of Ukraine is without power at this point in time, and repairs are ongoing due to the massive strikes by Russia against critical energy infrastructure across the country of Ukraine. Many countries are beginning to ship generators over to the country in order to support the civilian populations, which are currently running without, in many cases, gas, electrical, or running water, all of which these services do require some kind of electricity to ensure it gets to the millions of people that need it. The first batch of electrical transformers from Azerbaijan did end up arriving in Ukraine. In total, Azerbaijan is delivering 45 transformers and 50 generators and plans a second batch soon. So that's fantastic to see. Hopefully we'll see those going into the repair efforts and hopefully getting some of that valuable electricity back online, bring people from freezing in the very harsh Eastern European winter. And as we have talked about extensively on this channel, UXO, or unexploded ordnance, is being removed, but it is a slow but sure process. Unexploded ordnance is something that will plague Ukraine for decades to come, and we'll continue to see horrendous casualties as a result of unexploded ordnance from this war decades after this war is over. The last casualty will not be at the end of the war. It will be long, long afterwards. And this is the same kind of situation that plagues places where heavy anti-personnel mine and anti-tank mine usage has been used before. You look at places in the Middle East, and you can also look at Vietnam as well, where casualties occur every single year. We see that happening here in Ukraine, but EOD teams, the small intelligent teams that go out and defuse and demine these areas, are continuing to be hard at work. Over the past 24 hours and all throughout the day, on December the 16th, the Ukrainian Ministry of Internal Affairs stated that EOD personnel had actually ended up removing 470 explosive objects in 133 separate incidents. They were called 133 times and removed that many explosives. In total, 47 hectares was combed through, and 47 hectares is not a very large space at all. In fact, it's only 0.18 square miles. It's not even a 1 square mile worth of area to go through, and in just that area they found 470 explosive objects. This is exactly the situation we're seeing all across the country. And given how much firepower has been used and the heavy reliance on rocket artillery, the Rasputitsa mud being so soft, Rasputitsa literally translating in Russian to sea of mud, that doesn't allow for the crush switch, which detonates the explosives on most incoming rockets and projectiles, to actually be set off, and therefore they bury themselves in the mud and therefore become trapped and are unfortunately discovered, usually in very terrible circumstances, by somebody that happens upon it, leading to severe casualties. And we will continue to see, of course, heavy mine usage on both sides and heavy artillery usage on both sides. So this war will be devastating, and it will much more be like areas that have been affected in the past. If you look at France, for instance, every single year they have the steel harvest, which is where farmers will go out to their fields, and as they're plowing and disking their fields, they'll bring up unexploded ordnance from the World Wars, especially World War I, where they pile it on the side of the road like it's rocks being dug from their field, and EOD teams will go around and they actually pick them up every single year in France. That will likely be what happens to Ukraine as well, and there are areas of France, such as areas in parts of the Ardennes and Verdun, where it's a no-go zone even for experts for demining, because it is just too dangerous and the explosives too unstable. We can probably expect some areas of Ukraine to be in similar states after the war is ended. But we do get this from the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine. You can see these are 152 millimeter artillery shells which have been dug up. Appears to be at least 5 of them. That is an RPG-7 rocket. And these right here, these are 122 millimeter Katyusha rounds. These are what the BM-21 Grad system fire. So we will continue to see that those teams going through. They're very small. There's not a lot of EOD personnel in the world. They are a very close-knit, very small community, but there's a lot of work for them to do, and we will continue to see them working actively to remove many of these unexploded munitions for the foreseeable future. As we come over here, we get over to Novosilivka, which is Novoselivske. Sorry, my pronunciation is rather terrible, so I do apologize for butchering many of these. But this is in the Luhansk Oblast. We've seen pretty heavy fighting over this relatively strategically unimportant town in the Luhansk Oblast, where Russian forces are where it has been taken by Russian forces, retaken by Ukrainian forces, taken by Russian forces, retaken by Ukrainian forces, and now it would appear that it is once again embattled. We are getting some footage from the firefights that were taking place here just on the outskirts of Novoselivske here in the Luhansk Oblast. This from the point of view of the attacking Russian forces this time. Recently, TOS-1A thermal barrack munitions were launched at the town in order to soften up Ukrainian resistance there, and probably in preparation for this assault. However, this assault would appear, according to the footage, to be relatively unsuccessful. Unfortunately, there is copyright music to this. And you can see they're pushing through. This town has been utterly destroyed by the war. It's a relatively unorganized team here conducting a team assault. And it would appear that they're fighting. This is either in the very early morning, or it would likely be the evening. The best time to attack an enemy force is at what's called a time called either nautical evening or nautical morning twilight. What that is right at dusk or dawn. As you can see here, it's very difficult to distinguish people in amongst these areas. This debris, there's not great depth perception. This is the perfect time to attack because of that. It's too light out to use night vision devices. Everything is just too bright if you were to use them, but it's also too dark to operate without them, and it's very poor It's very poor visibility, depth perception, and a lot of other issues, making it the perfect time to attack. However, this force seems to be too little to actually dislodge Ukrainian forces within this region. The fight for the Luhansk Oblast does continue, and they do push towards the city of KRYVYI, the first objective taken by Russian forces at the very beginning of the Donbass offensive. However, all of their gains are currently being rolled back now. Now, the very thick Rasputitsa mud is making it difficult for both sides to accurately maneuver, but once the permafrost actually sets in, as we get here and later into winter, that's going to allow those vehicles to move effectively again over the fields and terrain off of the main roads, and allow for offensives to once again continue to get momentum until the spring thaw comes and creates the Rasputitsa again. Come down into the Donetsk region, and of course we get our daily Donetsk update from Pavel Korolenko, the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration, and he says that, quote, on December 16th, number of victims of the Russian army in Donetsk Oblast increased by 3 injured. Once again, Pavel Korolenko, and this is coming from his official Twitter account where he releases this. This covers the previous 24 hours at 8 a.m. every single morning local time that he releases these statements. And according to him, the 3 injured were in Bakhmut, and in total, not including occupied areas such as Donetsk, Volnovakha, or Mariupol, the civilian casualties starting on the 24th of February. Since then, 1,264 Ukrainian civilians have been killed, with 2,752 having been injured. Coming over here into Soledar. Soledar is to the north of Bakhmut. It lies along the northern flank, and we see where heavy fighting has continued in this very much contested town of Soledar and Bakhmutsky. The northern flank does hold, however. Ukrainian forces, under near constant bombardment, have been holding a line against Russian troops in the city. The city remains relatively contested, with Ukrainian forces holding the more urbanized sections, while Russian forces hold the more rural areas of the city. The brutal fighting over the past few months has left it completely destroyed, but holding Soledar means that the northern flank of Bakhmut will be secure and prevents encirclement of the large-scale defenses in the city.
Ось так люди заготовлюють собі дрова.
Just a little small glimpse of what it's like there in Soledar, and you could hear early on the explosions happening in the background from the artillery. Jumping down here into the areas around Bakhmut, the fighting for Bakhmut does continue, fighting from the rubble of what was once Bakhmut, as there truly isn't really a city anymore. It has been all but destroyed under the constant bombardment. Indiscriminate shelling and massive artillery barrages has left every single building either damaged or destroyed, and even firing incendiary weapons last night, specifically the 9S-22M, which is the incendiary rocket for the 122mm Katyusha from the BM-21 Grad systems. We do see some footage coming out from Ukrainian forces in the city. Take a look.
Третья не просрала. Интересно, они глубоко закапываются в землю, вот этой две.
Это на посту у нас Андрюха сидит. Пойду жмуриков покажу. Вот он, видишь, лежит. Вот один. Вот один. Вот один. Это не жмурики. Это пиндосы. Да. Освободители хреновы. Русский мир. Хреновый.
Это американцы.
Да вот тут тоже пацаны сидят.
The fighting is much more similar to World War I than it is really any other war. Trenches between both sides, hardened defensive emplacements, and the Russians appear to have been using wave-style attacks against Ukrainian trench lines, which obviously you can see were not very successful.
Ого.
No.
This section is showing trench lines which have been dug in the center of the city of Bakhmut.
Гранат! Гранат! Нахуй!
These are members of the Polish Foreign Legion who's fighting in vicinity of the region right now. Jumping down here to the south, this is the city of Marinka. Marinka, it lies directly to the south of the city of Donetsk. Here, along with just outside of Pizki, which was earlier seized by Russian forces, this area puts pressure on the southern sector of the city of Donetsk. Donetsk is the largest city in the Donetsk region and serves as the head of the Donetsk Oblast for the Russian forces. It was occupied by Russian-backed separatists prior to the beginning of the invasion by some time and now lies under Russian occupation. Here is where a lot of logistics, command, control, and communications for the Russian forces does lie within the Donbass. And by continuing to put pressure on these flanks, it makes it much more difficult for Russian forces to carry out directives and to ensure that the logistics remain safe and are able to get to Russian troops that are actually fighting the war on the front lines. Which is why Avdiivka, Marinka, and also Biski are so important by maintaining that pressure. And we see large-scale bombardments by Russian forces. Marinka has been under bombardment since the beginning of the war, leaving it just completely and utterly decimated. We can see that from some of the most recent drone footage that came out today here. This is Russian artillery bombardment of Ukrainian positions in and around the city of Marinka. You can see the absolute destruction of the city itself here, and absolutely nothing untouched, and much more resembles Mariupol in its destruction now than it does any kind of a modern 21st century city as it was prior to the war. Russian bombardments, especially the BM-21 Grad system, one of the most heavily utilized systems in the Russian military, is indiscriminate in its nature. By targeting infrastructure and by targeting the cities themselves, considering their high concentration in civilians and or high concentration in civilian infrastructures, this is residential infrastructure and administrations, hospitals, that actually constitutes a war crime under Additional Protocol 1 of the 1949 Geneva Conventions, being adopted in 1977. We jump over here, and this is in the Dniprovetsk Oblast, where, unfortunately, the death toll has risen in KRYVYI RIH. A fourth victim was found under the rubble. A 1.5-year-old boy was found dead under the rubble after a Russian cruise missile struck in a residential apartment building in the city of KRYVYI RIH on its way to strike infrastructural targets. In total, 4 civilians have been killed, and 13 have been injured. Both of this boy's parents were found having been killed yesterday during the ongoing search efforts. This is coming from the official Ministry of Defense of Ukraine's Twitter account. So the death toll from KRYVYI RIH from yesterday's strikes has raised to a total of 4 dead and 13 wounded, 4 wounded children included, and 1 child having been killed. But that is the news coming out of the country of Ukraine for today. For over the last 24 hours, those are the developments. And we can move into the international news, where there has also been a ton of developments. We start off on the eastern part of Russia, specifically in Vladivostok, where a large warehouse, over 1,100 meters, is currently on fire at a warehouse here. This is on KRYVYI Street in Vladivostok. You can see just that how big that fire is raging here. It's unsure what the cause is, as that is what has been said about every fire we've seen in Russia, and there's been quite a few major ones.
Пожарки стоят. Сначала загорелась мусорка, пытались тушить, видимо, что-то не получилось.
And so that is the fire coming out of Vladivostok. Out of Brussels, Belgium, coming from NATO. NATO has decided to give the holiday greetings to everybody. Soldiers from Norway, Latvia, Estonia, and the United States sang the tune Carol of the Bells, originally Shizrik, coming from Ukraine, which is a Ukrainian New Year's and holiday carol. In the snowy, and this was taken during a snowy in a snowy forest in rural Latvia.
Ding dong, ding dong.
Hark how the bells, sweet silver bells, all seem to say, throw cares away. Christmas is here, bringing good cheer to young and old, meek and the bold. Ding dong, that is their song, with joyful ring, all caroling. One seems to hear words of good cheer from everywhere, filling the air. All hound and town, raising their sound, o'er hill and dale, telling their tale. Gayly they ring, while people sing songs of good cheer. Christmas is here. Merry, 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 merry Christmas. Merry, 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 merry Christmas. All on this end, long without end, gay joyful tone to every home. Ding dong, that is their song, with joyful ring, all caroling. Ding dong, ding dong.
Ding dong, ding dong.
So that is the Happy Holidays coming from NATO. Moving into the Middle East, coming out of Tehran, 20 protesters currently face execution. In Iran, 25 protesters are facing execution. 11 of them have already been sentenced, including a 15-year-old boy and a 17-year-old girl. Others are awaiting trial under articles that have capital punishment. They include 11 individuals sentenced to death: Sahand Nurmahadzadeh, Mahan Sadarat Madani, Manukher Mehman Nawaz, Mohammed Bahrani, Mohammed Gobadlua, Saman Sadi Yazin, Hamid Gari, Hassan Lua, Mohammed Mehdi Karami, Saeed Mohammed Hussein Mohammadi, and Don, unnamed individual in the Alborz province. 3 individuals have undergone trials under capital charges who are either at risk of being sentenced to death or may have already been sentenced to death with no publicly available information as to their status. Saeed Shirazi, Abulfazl, Mary Hossan Hijlau, and Mohsen Rezazadeh Garagula. 6 individuals who may be awaiting or undergoing trial on charges carrying the death penalty: Akbar Ghaffari, Tumaj Shalei, Ibrahim Reji, Amir Nasar Azadani, and Saleh Mihashami, and Saeed Yaqubi. Say their names to save their lives. They're amongst thousands of prisoners which are currently facing charges of trying to overthrow the theocratic regime in Iran. Meanwhile, oil company employees in Iran are going on strike. Employees of several Iranian oil companies in Asuleya, Gasharan, and Garich Island and Alvaz have stopped working and went on strike on Saturday. Striking oil workers in Iran's Asulay chant, "Enough promises or tables are empty." According to videos of strikes which spread to other cities like Mahashar on Saturday, the first day of the working week in Iran, the strikes were held in protest and inattention to the demands of these workers, including higher wages and retirement bonuses. Coming from Iran International in English. Coming out of Africa, and we have several developments coming from the UN and many other organizations, another event. The first one from the United Nations is coming from Somalia, where humanitarian needs are expected to rise as a result of, while the situation regarding the drought has been, for the most part, avoided, as there has been quite an influx of humanitarian aid into the region that reached a wide variety of individuals in need. Unfortunately, the needs for humanitarian efforts in Somalia are expected to rise between now and June of 2023. As this is expected to be as a result of drought violence, additional climate issues, as well as the political instability within the nation itself. Once again, coming from the United Nations. And in Tigray, while the situation has been slowly but surely improving humanitarian-wise from the country, which was cut off for at least 2 years and then ravaged by warfare, the United Nations, according to the United Nations, the needs for Tigray will remain high. And while the situation is improving, the need will remain high with people in this region requiring long-term humanitarian support. Coming from the UN Relief Chief, who just today ended up allocating $10 million in order to support efforts. And coming from Sudan, the UN has released the Sudan response plan for the upcoming year. Their estimates right now are that the needs for 2023 in the country of Sudan will be significant. Already, the different crises around the world have really pushed the United Nations to the brink of not being able to provide for everybody, and has seen immense strains on the logistical capabilities of the United Nations and other humanitarian groups trying to provide aid to people across the world. Sudan is no different, and that is expected to rise as well. The need there in the country of Sudan. It is estimated that in 2023, the UN is now currently estimating that 15.8 million people will require humanitarian aid in the country of Sudan alone. Overall, throughout the globe, there are a total of 345 million people that require humanitarian assistance. Once again, coming from the United Nations. From Burkina Faso, 39 individuals were eliminated during a counterterrorism operation. The armed forces of Burkina Faso said that 39 terrorists were eliminated during a counterterrorism operation. Operations took place in 5 settlements on December the 1st through the 10th. The security forces managed to destroy several shelters of jihadists as well as finding their caches. During skirmishes with militants, 1 serviceman was killed. 10 more were injured, to which the group which they belong to is an Islamic State and Al-Qaeda linked group called Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslim, or JNIM, which operates very heavily throughout the region. Jumping across the Atlantic here and into the country of Guatemala, the United Nations also has released a report regarding Guatemala and the needs there. In fact, according to the United Nations, nearly 50% of all children in Guatemala, the ages 5 and under, currently suffer from undernutrition. So they are currently working on trying to provide more humanitarian aid in places throughout Central and South America, as these are areas which are less attention given to them from many different humanitarian organizations. And with the hard-hitting news having been wrapped up for the night, we do take a look at, we go up here and take a look in Chicago, where if you may remember from the early and mid 2000s, you may remember a very small little game that you could carry in your pocket called a Tamagotchi. It was a little creature you had to take care of. I never had one personally, but I certainly know people who did. Well, there's a real one now. This is a real-life Tamagotchi for you if you are interested in such a thing. They have developed a smartwatch that contains a slime mold, Ferrocerum polycephalum. It is a unique being that can be considered an evolutionary outsider, as it sits between the plant and the animal kingdoms. They don't fall into either category. At the same time, the slime mold can conduct electricity and remember information, although it doesn't have a nervous system. The device has a heart rate sensor, but this function depends on the health of the slime mold. If the slime mold is fed regularly and is fed water and oats, this will stimulate the growth of the slime mold itself, which will complete the circuit. Then the heart rate sensor will be able to transmit readings. If you do not feed the slime mold, he hibernates for a long time, months, or even years. Coming from the university, or the coming from the Chicago News regarding the slime mold. But that is actually all of the news in the world. A little bit of a light night tonight, I understand that. But as we said earlier in the stream, no news, generally speaking, is good news. Because most of what hits the news is, generally speaking, not fantastic things. It's usually kind of depressing, or it has a lot of people suffering. So, relatively light news tonight. Of course, still a lot to cover, but there we are. So I hope that you found this very informative. I hope that everyone has a great rest of their weekend, of course. But please be sure to help us be the news that gives back. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of humanitarian needs as we're getting ready to roll into 2023. These organizations all throughout the world are already looking ahead and reevaluating what will be required for the next year as they are planning their needs. So please be able to help them and support them in their efforts. If you check out the video description below, we have a ton of different organizations down there, and 80% or more of all the donations that they do receive go directly to their programs and go directly to helping people. So in that way, you allow us to be the news that gives back. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. Help us grow this project and help us be able to give back to more people and try, building this community even more. Give us that like and subscribe. Share this video and share our content amongst your friends, family, and communities, and we hope to see even more of you back here when we are live once again on Monday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. In the meantime, I do hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe, and if not, I hope that you guys end up finding that safety and security in the very near future. My name is Paul from the New News. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend, and we hope to see you all back here once again on Monday night. Have a great one, everybody.
Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волновахи, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шверхуємо. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волновахи, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 000 лет. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. змішаємо з багном. І стріляти в головах, і чутно кличе, ідіть нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Gone home, Russian soldiers gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляти в головах, і чутно кличе, ідіть нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Gone home, Russian soldiers gone home.